we're thinking about making it consistent across the administration, we're going to need as much support as we can get. So thanks for your help on that as we go forward. This will be a process that takes several weeks and probably a couple of months to get done. And so any support you can give us will be great, and ultimately to the benefit of yourself, your sub-recipients, as well as everybody else who participates in these calls. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or Stephanie, if you have anything to add to that point, feel free to jump in.
Thanks, Lee. I really appreciate it. I would just say, talking more about performance planning, we have, as Lee pointed out, asked for some consultants to give us some proposals. We are hoping to award that a week from Friday so they could start the following week. But we have begun our performance audits with the state auditor for SFRF. We've started the financial audit as well, and I think the single audits start soon. So just wanted to make sure that y'all are aware of that. There's probably start with NC Pro and then move to the agencies. Part of the reason that we are going to engage with another consultant is to make sure that we all have robust performance measures, to also make sure that we are doing a good job of measuring how quickly we're spending through the funds, and that we can have all of them obligated by the end of December 2024, and all of them spent by the end of December 2026. We, NC Pro recently attended several, and I know DEQ did as well, and DIT, the School of Government, Commerce, attended several regional meetings. There are 2 more going on with all of the local governments who received local fiscal recovery funds. We know that there are quite a number of local governments that are getting funds, state fiscal recovery funds, either through one of these agencies that's on the call, or directly from NC Pro. And so there was a lot of concern, I think, among the local governments as they're trying to administer their local fiscal recovery funds to also understand state fiscal recovery funds. And we talked a lot with the School of Government and others about obligation, those deadlines, what it means, and that we will be working together on the state agency side, not only to address performance for the state auditor. I know we already have performance for Treasury, but also to make sure that we're doing what we want to get accomplished with these funds, so that we use them all and we use them wisely, and we accomplish what the governor would like to see us and the legislature would like to see us accomplish to help us with recovery. So that is what's coming next. Again, I anticipate it will take us another week to ask more questions of the consultants, choose the one that we're going to choose, and then hopefully we'll get started thereafter. They're going to start with NC Pro. We're going to have conversations with them about the work that you've already done, and the work that we've done, and then we'll work with them. But they are going to help us with performance measures, with a dashboard, and with, again, making sure we have a very robust process for tracking funds and the usage of those funds, so that we do everything we can to expend them before the deadline. So that's what we kind of have planned. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have them, feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. We'll plan to reach out to y'all as we move through the process, and do it agency by agency, and it'll be obviously involving your NC Pro grants manager as well.
I have a question
Sure.
in regards to this, because I'm just sending out award letters based on the distribution to our science museums across the state. And we're talking about performance measures. I just want to be specific in understanding, we're talking about performance measures relative to getting money out the door, or are we also talking about the impacts of these monies in the places that receive them?
We are talking about both. I think from a statewide perspective, we want to make sure we not only get the money out the door, but we get the projects completed. But we also want to make sure that how we use the money and how we completed the projects and what resulted from those projects, because we do have a wide variety of projects that this money has been appropriated for, that you and we, for our subrecipients and beneficiaries, that we are thinking about it robustly. And so I think that some agencies, like you, may already know what you want the science museums to measure, and that's fine. And in that case, maybe you have a robust performance measure, and we'll have the consultant talk to you about that, and they'll say, this looks great, or they might say, this looks great. Have you also thought about this? But part of the reason we wanted to do this is not every agency is in the same place in terms of measuring performance. And we don't want to set ourselves up that we want to measure what we've done with the funds and what the impacts have been, but we want to do it in a way that's not so tedious that we spend all this time and energy that we do not have trying to collect data that we cannot get. So a lot of it, I think, in building good performance measures is measuring what you want to measure, but also making sure that there's data that you can use that's easy to collect and practical. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Just to add, we, and we request scope of work and how our recipients plan to measure the impact of the money. We just came off of a 3-year grant specifically built around community of practice in evaluation. And so we're incorporating that in the process and providing added technical support with each of the museums relative to how they develop these impacts. Now, how they apply the money is quite variable. Some of it's applied to exhibits, some of it's applied to staff, some of it's applied to specific programs. But in each of those cases, there are ways to collect data that clearly show impact based on evaluative methodology. So, for us, it's both establishing and continuing to have a community of practice around evaluation and data gathering and interpreting that data for success. And so with that being said, that's how we're moving forward in light of this. This might be a whole nother layer irrelevant to the level of concern and interest of the auditors. But for us, it's a practice we've been building towards through also having to provide professional development opportunities and coming off of a 3-year grant around evaluation. So for us, it's a continuation of gathering data and interpreting it in ways that show possibilities for improvement, among other things. So I just say that to say, if there's something else, yeah, the consultants would be good to have. It's just that folks are going to start sending in their scope of work and their budgets probably within the next week or two in light of having just gotten these award letters. So that might be ahead of the curve for the time that it may take to put the consultants into play.
That's understandable. And we knew that everybody would be in different places. So you guys sound like you're farther ahead coming off a 3-year project where you look at performance. But we wanted to, and that's why we wanted to have a consultant who could come in, who has a lot of experience in a wide range of performance measures on a wide type of project. Because we're talking about everything from science museums to building water infrastructure to putting broadband in place to a research project that's going to a private company, And so we also know that the state auditor, even though we're not, we can ask beneficiaries. So this gets to our categories of beneficiaries, subrecipients, and contractors. Subrecipients, for sure, we have to do performance. State agencies, for sure, we have to think about how we've used our money and how we measure the impact. But beneficiaries, we don't really have any authority to ask them how they use their money. They are beneficiaries, and once they show that they met the requirements that the legislature put into law for the benefit, they get the money. And we have a bunch of different categories of beneficiaries. We have private companies, we have independent colleges, we have others like that. But the state auditor has pushed us to try to measure again how the beneficiaries have used that money. So we're also going to ask the consultants, I think, this very tough question of what type of questions should we ask these beneficiaries, again, as wide ranging as independent colleges to private companies. And you know, what do we do, like, if they don't, I mean, if they don't send us any, it's voluntary for them. So if they send us back, this is how we used our money and we'll be happy to tell you about it, that's one thing. If they don't, then at what, you know, we're going to have to get into what percentage of respondents did we get back and how much can you apply these findings to the whole group and things like that. So NC Pro has a very small staff, and I think a lot of agencies that are handling these programs may or may not have had federal grants before or had to do things like this. So again, this is more of a how can we provide support to agencies. It may be you already have what you need. It may be we add on to what you have. And then how do we bring it back into a dashboard that we can show to the state auditors, that we can show to the legislature, that we can show to the general public, so there's transparency around how we're using these funds and, you know, what we're accomplishing from the perspective of overall the $5.4 billion. Again, I think this would certainly be an easier project if we were giving money for all the same things, but we're not. So really cross-cutting that whole area has made it a little bit challenging for sure. That was a great question, Daryl. Thank you for that. Does anybody else have any questions? We pledge to try to make this as pain-free as possible. I know working with consultants, times can be tough, but we are excited about it and are trying to. We worked very closely with DOA and want to thank them for their help in making sure that this is sort of a project that will be helpful to everybody. We're getting people who've done this before, who have a lot of experience in this area, who can take a bunch of different projects and different types of things and put it together into a dashboard that I think would be very helpful to all of us. So the next thing on the agenda is to talk about our monitoring training. So this was the first training that we had. It was yesterday and Tuesday with state agencies to attend our monitoring. We had it over at the Friday Center and had a group from a trainer, Van, come in and help us, who has lots of federal experience. Could talk a lot about uniform guidance and, you know, what applies in terms of most of it was focused more on what applies for uniform guidance, so non-revenue replacement funds. But we also talked about a lot of examples of revenue replacement. We talked a lot about monitoring, how you use audits towards monitoring, and just generally spent 2 days together getting to meet some of our partners and state agencies and learn more about what our requirements are. So I want to call on some of the folks who were at that training to kind of give some feedback on their experiences, share it with others in this group, because we are going to have another training in October. And so I thought it might be helpful for those of you who were there, and I see a couple folks that were there, if y'all want to come on and share a little bit about what it was like for the past 2 days.
I actually found it very helpful, even though I've been doing grants for a long time. He presented it in a very helpful way, and I liked how he answered our questions. So he would answer questions, but he would actually give you, I don't know how to, he would show you the backup of how he answered the question. So I feel more confident that I can manage the grants better from my side now. So it was totally, even though it was 2 days and it was long, it was totally worth the time. So I appreciate it. It was very helpful.
Thanks, Heather.
Hi, Stephanie. This is Michelle Edlin from DEQ, and I found it to be helpful as well, very beneficial. It was because I'm so new to DEQ, it was great, first of all, to put faces with names on emails and have resources that I can pull from. And also in the manual that we received, it had samples that will be helpful moving forward. And so I think the training was great. I'm excited to find out that you are offering it again in October, because there are a couple of 3 grant staff who are starting Monday. And so it would be great to go ahead and get them in. If I can put in a plug for 3 spots right now, it
We
would be
got you
great
down. Okay.
to get them in and have them go through the training as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, we definitely, and I should say this is free for state agencies. So we even had a couple folks from other agencies attend, even if you're not doing monitoring, just so you can understand what your monitoring team is being asked to do. And when we talk about uniform guidance, breaking it down, giving examples. Are there others who want to share?
Yeah, Stephanie, this is Christine Altio from DOR. Even though I do have experience from the audit side, it was helpful to hear somebody with hearing Van with his vast federal experience, his perspective from the federal level. But also I appreciated, just being in a group together, being able to discuss here's specific circumstances where we have questions or concerns, and, just working together to say, okay, how would you handle that? So I appreciated it from that standpoint, and I would highly recommend it. Definitely, if you're not familiar with monitoring it, it was a very good overview of what's required out of you.
This is Jane from DHHS. I'll just add that I thought Van, the facilitator, did a really good job of taking what can be dry material, sometimes making it really interesting and engaging, and talking through. We had a lot of opportunities to do specific scenarios and apply the material and have those discussions. So as someone who's relatively new to understanding uniform guidance and working with subrecipient monitoring in this capacity, it was a really helpful overview for me personally.
Well, I hate to mention that I hate to say that nobody mentioned the food was really good.
Thank you. I thought so too.
So the training, it was really helpful, but the best part is he showed us where to find information if we need to look for it.
Yeah,
Hi,
I meant to
Stephanie.
bring my notebook too, so y'all can see. I don't know if anybody else who went has a notebook, but you come home with a big training notebook with lots of examples. And I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Please go ahead.
That's okay. This is Kimberly Gales with the Department of Commerce, Division of Workforce Solutions. And I would have to concur that it was the most interesting that I ever heard CFRs presented. The information was really good, knowing where to find it, knowing how to locate what you needed. And I like the idea that he provided various strategies you can use when you're approaching different difficulties with your participants, how to handle those potential problems and being on top of them ahead of the game. So the training was definitely very valuable, and Van was extremely knowledgeable.
Thanks, Kimberly. And Jamila and Marquise were showing our giant notebooks that we got, which have all the relevant parts that you need. NC Pro went through all this training as well. We are paying for this training again. We paid for it this time. We'll pay for it so that you state agencies don't have to find money to pay for it, and you can send your folks. Did anybody else want to add anything? I just want to say thank you to all our state agency participants. I really enjoyed spending a couple days getting to know you and talking through our many examples, and knowing that we have this resource with each other going forward. I think we'll have a good group of folks that if we have questions of each other with monitoring, and we'll continue this as our training goes on. Here's who is in another agency that may have a beneficiary or may have a subrecipient or may have a contractor, is revenue replacement, it's not revenue replacement, or may just generally have a question. I think we'll have a group that we can go to and ask. We'll talk about, should we set up a Teams channel, or should we do things like that where we can ask each other questions? So just thank you for your feedback and for being willing to kind of be our test case for this as we move forward. Anybody want to add anything else? Okay, we're thinking about having it, I think, at the Friday Center again. Yep, so we have parking. They do a good job. We have various breaks, but they do a good job, and we figured out how we could pay for it and provide food so people didn't have to drive off campus and come back to try to make lunch. But it was I think a good worthwhile event, and I hope if you haven't had a chance to attend, or you want to have a chance to attend, or you want to have other folks from your agency to attend, October 18th and 19th, I think, is the next one. It is a repeat of the one we did this time, so it's just to make sure we have more opportunities. So thank you all for Jane, Christina, Talil, Michelle, Kimberly, Heather, for speaking up and talking about your experiences. And I think that's it for monitoring training. And Andy, I'll turn it over to you for next steps.
Sure. Thanks, Stephanie. As mentioned, we'll do another round, a repeat of the monitoring training on October 18th and 19th. So if there are folks who didn't join that want to join the fun next go around, or you want to bring other folks from your teams, definitely plan ahead for that, just a few weeks away now. I did want to do some quick follow-up. I know last month or a couple months ago, we shared some new data resources on the NC Pro website. I did want to revisit some of those to make sure folks are aware. We have made some updates to those. So I will quickly share where all this is, so it can be of use to you all in some of your planning efforts. And if you have suggestions of data that you all work with that you'd like to see included all in one place, or data sets or data dashboards that you'd like us to link to, we are happy to do so. Please reach out. So just from the main NC Pro site, you go to data and research. We still have the same 4 categories here, so you can go through the COVID-19 funding, which Sue's walked through in detail. We did recently, I think just last week, or maybe earlier this week, launched a new and improved version of this on Tableau. So there's some new functionality, a little bit easier to use, and you should actually be able to now download the underlying data, though I don't want to overpromise that. So if you're not able to, let me know, but that should be in there now. And then we didn't get time to visit the economic data dashboard. I think this should be of interest as we look at economic indicators in relation to where the state was in February 2020. That's our main benchmark as our pre-pandemic month. So you can see where unemployment rates are. We actually have broken down at a county level establishment employment. This has recently been updated to pull the most recently available quarter, which is through March 2022. So you can see February compared to March. There's a pretty wide variance across the state in terms of where we are compared to pre-pandemic. So even though you can see up here, the state is doing well overall, you can see how that actually breaks down into some regional differences. And you can get into specific industries. Again, the overall numbers don't reflect fully the different experiences, the different impacts across the state. So you can see how this breaks down into different industries, both in terms of absolute numbers and then just some fun visuals or interesting visuals that are interactive, so you can track what the impacts have been across different industries. We are including DHHS's data on hospitalization rates as well, as we continue to navigate some of the public health considerations and impacts on the economy. And then for those who, we want to make sure agencies are aware, we've been running for, we're into month 5 now, wrapping up month 5, a survey that goes out to local leaders around the state. Nearly every county right now, we're planning in short order here, pretty major expansion of the survey. But we've been able to generate, so this is a survey that asks local leaders about conditions in their communities as they progress month to month, as well as in comparison to prior to the pandemic. And we primarily ask across a few different issues that affect communities like childcare, access to technology, elder care, and healthcare. We actually added a question about transportation this last month. And so you can see here, based on the existing data set, we've been able to draw statistically significant differences, and I see how there are changes and differences on a regional basis. At this point, it's just looking at differences by prosperity zone. Again, as we expand the survey, we're close right now to be able to do COG level analysis. This expansion will help us do that. But wanted to make sure that you all are aware of this as a resource, just to understand sort of beyond what statewide data have been available over the last couple of years. We now have better insight at a sub-state level, which may be helpful with mapping where ongoing resources may be needed. So there's that. We'll add some new data visualization up here, similar to the other pages related to that, but want to make sure folks have that on their radar. And want to make sure you're aware of this as both as a resource as well as you all have deep and unique connections with different communities and leaders around the state, and make sure that they're participating in the survey. This is data that it's interesting for us to put on the website, but it's really important at a local level that this is actionable and relevant and timely. So as we continue to improve and expand this survey, we want to do it in a collaborative way that's really driven by what the needs are and opportunities are to really support our local and state and regional decision makers as we continue to deploy these transformative resources. So that's it for the data. Any questions or notes on the data resources before I move into the next piece? All right. So the last thing on the agenda before we do our usual optional office hours is to just make note of the upcoming reporting deadlines. Nothing is, the first is we've mentioned this before, but the annual performance report that's been listed in the guidance is due tomorrow. We are not collecting that, so do not worry that work is getting folded into the performance planning that Stephanie discussed earlier. So if you haven't heard, please don't send us something tomorrow. The next reporting deadlines on SFRF will still be now October 15th, so we're going to continue with the 15th as the reporting date. I just want to underscore October is a very reporting heavy month for NC Pro, including the SFR funds, but a number of other funding sources. And we know there's going to be a lot of back and forth and just making sure that we are working with you all to ensure timely and accurate reporting. So I just want to make a request of you that if you have any questions that we can work through ahead of the deadline on the 15th, the sooner the better on all of that. So we are, of course, working with the grants managers, internal NC Pro to identify and try to get ahead of any challenges that may come up. But the sort of open request is if you are unsure of something or you want to sort of get our eyes on it, please try to reach out before the 15th so we can avoid having a big rush right at the end. We do have to submit all the data that you all provide us. We have to in turn go through, clean up, and convert into the formats that U.S. Treasury requires, and we have to do that in about 2 weeks time is our turnaround on all of that. So that's just our general request as we get into October as our big reporting month. Please provide us some grace, but also try to work with us a little bit ahead of time as we work through it. So those are the next step items. Unless there's anything else, I think we will shift into the office hours. The NC Pro team will stick around here so we can answer any questions that you all have or facilitate conversation on topics that you all would like to discuss. But if if you don't have anything else, you're welcome to hop off. I don't know, Stephanie or Lee, if you're still on, if you want to say anything before we shift gears here.
Lee had another meeting, so he had to drop off, but no, we're here to answer questions. So thanks, everybody. Just stay on and ask us if you need any help with anything. All right, anybody have any questions that we can address? All right, hearing none, thank you for your time. We very much appreciate it. We're here if you need us. Contact your grants manager if you have any other questions. Thank you.